Welcome to this. Sorry, I'm recording this. I don't normally, but we're going to make this available. So, yes, let's get started. Welcome to this webinar, the 6 principles of for successful data governance. So, I want you to imagine if your organization understood and managed its data well, and as a result, you eradicate unnecessary costs, you remove efficiencies, and you're able to make the most of every single opportunity that comes up. Think about it. What difference would that make if you and your organization had the data to help you win the game? And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to give you some principles to help you design and implement data governance effectively so you can understand, manage, and use your data better. So before we get started on that, there's some basic housekeeping I want to cover. So if you don't mind keeping your microphones off and muted, that just helps the general sound quality for everybody. If you could keep your cameras on, though, it's really nice to see some faces. So I can see some of you. I really appreciate, because otherwise I just feel like I'm talking into the ether. So it's lovely to see you. Thank you for those who are turning on your camera. I really, really appreciate that. Lovely to see your faces. And we're going to keep the introduction into the chat because we're expecting a few more people and it just gets messy otherwise. So please feel free to ask your questions. I'm planning for around 30 minutes of me talking you through the 6 principles, and then we've allowed some time at the end for questions and answers. So I think everybody's already confirmed that you can see this, you can hear me all right, because I think people would have told me in the chat before now. So I have a question for you. I love doing in-person events where I can actually talk to people, but kind of the next best thing when we're doing these things is to kind of just find out a little bit about you all. So whoops, I've gone backwards. How did I do that? I clicked too enthusiastically. I'd love it if you could tell me by typing in the chat where in the world you're currently dialing in from. It's always, I love finding out about people. So if you've just joined, if you could put yourself on mute, please, it just helps the sound quality for everybody else. But we have got, wow, and people are off. So we've got quite a few from the UK, London, not too far from me. I'm just south of London, Finland, Germany, Spain, Ireland, loads from the UK, Sweden, Scotland. Wow, Peak District, Montreal. Oh, how do I decide who's the most exotic, Montreal or Finland? Wow, I am really, I always find it really wonderful how many different countries people dial into. So thank you for joining me today. It's really lovely to see you all. And I will be asking you a few more interactions to try and keep it engaging as we go through. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Nicola Askham and I'm known as the Data Governance Coach. I help organizations understand and manage their data better. Sorry, I've done it again. My mouse, I've got a new mouse and it's surprisingly sensitive. But for about 20 years now, I've helped corporates such as eSure, Volkswagen Group and Penguin to reduce costs and inefficiencies and to remain competitive. Typically, people turn to me because their data is a mess and they need help sorting it out, or because they realize that they're pouring cash into new initiatives that are failing because of poor quality data. So as well as providing coaching and consulting to help my clients manage their data, I run popular training courses and do things like this because I think it's really important to give people the skills they need to make sure that data is used to solve problems and make better informed decisions. So I would love to know, before I dive into the actual principles, what's your biggest challenge with data governance right now? What is it that's making it hard for you to do? I'd love you to type that in the chat if you wouldn't mind. Ownership at business level, getting all on board, defining ownership, a bit of a theme here. I always love this bit of these sessions because it almost feels like a bit like group therapy. And I hope for those of you reading, you can see that actually it's probably not something you're doing wrong. It's just, this is what happens and how hard it is. Accountability of owners, proper cataloging, ownership and sheer volumes. Yeah, onboard the data on the data governance platform, lack of interest, buying. So as you can see, buying is a big one. So obviously this is a short masterclass, so I'm not going to have a chance to go into everybody's particular circumstances in a lot of detail, but what we will do is go through give you an introduction to the 6 principles for successful data governance that I have developed over numerous years. And then what we're going to do is go into a bit more detail on just 3 of them. So these are the 6 that we are going to touch on. So we have opportunities, which covers a lot of what you've been putting in the chat there, which is the, what are the reasons for your organization doing data governance? What benefits can they get? So the capability, which is, have you actually got the skills and the knowledge and on how to do it? Custom building your framework for your organization. We talk a lot about the, we will talk about this, about how important it is for you actually have a simple approach to data governance. And I always find it seems really stupid to say launch, but I've come across it so many times over the years where I've worked with organizations who say, I don't know why this isn't working. I've written the data governance framework. And when I've looked at it, it probably isn't that bad. It's quite good, but they haven't actually done anything with it. They haven't actually made it happen. So the launch is really, really important. And the other thing to also remember is you need to evolve your data governance framework as your organization continues to evolve and change over time. So we're only actually going to, as I say, go through 3 of them. But don't worry, we don't have time to go into all 6, but near the end of this session, I will share you a link to a page on my website where I've put some free resources for you. Included is a blog which goes into a bit more detail on all 6 principles, so you can get that at the end. So by the end of this session, I want you to take away 3 key messages that you need everybody in your organization to be considering data as an asset, that you need a really clear vision of what you're trying to achieve with data governance. And I did say I might mention simplicity once or twice, but you need a simple approach to be successful with data governance. So let's get you to join in a bit more and perhaps just put a quick yes or no in the chat to tell me, do you believe that data is currently viewed as an asset in your organization? Interested to see what the answers are coming up as. So we've got no's. Again, I have to say, every time I run this masterclass, because I've been doing this for over a year now, we're getting more yeses, which I'm finding really, really encouraging. Because hopefully it means that we are starting this culture shift. But we have a few no's there as well, but we're definitely getting some more yeses there. Or Robin saying some data is. I think that is reasonable, that some people will understand that some is. Yeah, that's it's a mixed bag, but I'm definitely seeing more yeses, which I think is really encouraging. So I personally believe that successful data governance is more about the people than the data. And that means that we need everybody in our organizations to start thinking about data and the fact that it's an asset. So that means that culture change is absolutely key to a successful data governance initiative. And it might sound a bit counterintuitive to you, because you might be thinking, well, surely it's about the data. And ultimately, the data is what we want to try and manage. But we do that by getting the people to change their mindset when it comes to data governance. And, one of the things you've got to consider is, if I had asked you the question about, do you think that your buildings that your organization owns, whether they're offices or factories or, whatever, if they are assets, I expect you would have all said yes. I don't think anybody would have put in the chat, no, our users don't think our buildings are an asset. But because everybody gets that your buildings are an asset, you maintain them proactively. You don't wait for the ceiling tiles to fall down or big holes in the wall to appear. You've got maintenance or an estates team that go around regularly and they check the building and they check that the sprinkler system's working, that the fire alarms are working, that their fire extinguishers have been tested. So people kind of get that they're an asset, and we don't have to explain this to people. They just understand it. And we need to get to the same level with data, because until we have achieved that, the analogy is basically, if this was, a building, the current data approach is, there's a hole in that wall. It's not exactly what we want. So what I'll do is I'll just put a poster over it, and then hopefully nobody will notice it, and we've patched it up. Because that's kind of what we do with data a lot before we get data governance in place. So what we've got to do is get people understanding that this truly is an asset and is valuable to the organization. Sorry, that's my dogs barking in the background. I assume we have a delivery that my husband will sort out. So my next question for you is, are you treating your data governance initiative in your organization as a project? Just type a yes or no. In the thing. No, Peter was in quickly. A few yeses. I'm not going to call out names. Mainly no's. That is really encouraging. And I don't know whether that's the no's are by design or anything, but I would say it's really important not to treat data governance as a project, because data projects have an end date. And in the early years of doing data governance, I've been told so many times, I'll be glad when this data governance project is over. You'll go away and stop bugging me, and I can get back to normal. And, they've missed the point entirely. This isn't about going back to normal. We're implementing a new way of thinking, a new normal when it comes to data. So it's really important that, to help with this culture change we need to address, that we don't call it a project. Now, I do get you might have a project-like initiative to get things set up and running, but it's best not to call it that. And Marco, that's very candid of you. Thank you for being so honest, saying that yes, they are treating, but wish that they're not. And I think that's, it's true. It really does make it a lot harder. So I would call it something. I tend to just go for a data governance initiative, but different words work in different organizations because you've got different cultures. But something that doesn't have an end date, because that's another thing that bugs me a lot on LinkedIn, is that from time to time, you'll see somebody write a LinkedIn post about data governance, and they think they've been really clever because they say that data governance is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so in some ways, yeah, it feels like a marathon implementing it, let's be honest. And it does take a long time, but marathons still have an end date or an end line. So, we don't really want to use analogies like that. We want to get people to understand that this just will become part of the new normal. So instead of having sprints or marathons, I think the best way to think about it is a way that one of my former coaching clients described it. Was he was saying, everybody wants the latest diet pill. We just take one pill before we go to bed at night, and we wake up in the morning and we've lost all the excess weight. We're super fit and healthy, and we had no effort. And that's kind of what people really wish we could do with data governance. And we mustn't do anything that reinforces the belief that we're just going to magically sort it all for them. So I think this was Ed's idea of saying the best way of thinking about it is to think about data governance being your personal trainer. And the data governance team will always be there, because let's face it, yes, when I've been seeing my personal trainer in the past, I'm really good, because I don't want to go back next time and tell her I haven't done the things that she asked me to. But I haven't been seeing her for a while. And the dumbbells in my spare room may not have moved and may have a little bit of dust on them. So, what we want is data governance to be like the personal trainer for data in your organization. So hopefully I've convinced you that data really does need to be thought of as an asset. I like David saying data governance is like a lifestyle, change the way you think and act in the business. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that is really, really good. And Peter saying start small and demonstrate quick wins. Absolutely. I think that is very great advice when it comes to data governance. We've got to deliver some value. We can't say, give me 2 years and we'll have everything in place and then we'll start delivering benefits. Nobody will give you that long. But hopefully we're all now thinking and realizing, even if we're not currently managing it as an asset, that this is something we need to address. That, we need to actually really focus on having this clear vision of what you're trying to achieve. So would you, I suppose, another one we can do a yes, no in the meeting chat is, are you clear on why your organization is doing data governance? You just do a yes or no. Oh, this is really encouraging. Lots of people who are very, very clear. Well, no, that's Veronica's being very honest. Thank you. Oh, no, mainly yeses. This is encouraging. This is really going to cheer me up at the end of a busy week to see so many people so positive. So it really is important that you know why you're doing it. To do it for best practice just isn't useful. It doesn't convince anybody. So, particularly if you're trying to convince people to view data as an asset, you've got to be able to explain the opportunities to your organization of doing data governance. And as I said, this is what I did in the early days, to be saying, well, it's best practice. We should do it. We should manage our data properly. And, the people I was talking to were saying, look, I'm responsible for delivering big programs or parts of the corporate strategy, and I just don't have the time to do this thing just because it would be nice to. So, what we've got to do is be able to explain the benefits to people, because we know that better understood, better quality data will deliver a host of benefits and lead to better decisions being made. So I've heard all sorts of horror stories and things over the years, but the worst one I've come across was an organization who used data to come to the conclusion that one part of their business was loss-making. And so the decision was made to close down that part of the business. But what they actually discovered a bit later was, whilst the data in the report itself was not wrong, it included data from another part of the business, which skewed the figures and made it look like that particular area was loss-making. So I can't even tell you what sector it was in, because it was a few years back and it got huge publicity in the media in the UK. But they closed down this. Nobody was overly happy about it. I don't think the staff, the customers, but a decision was made. But when they realized the mistake they'd made, they didn't feel that they could take the reputational damage for admitting that. And it was actually the impetus for that particular organization adopting data governance, because they did not want that to happen ever again. So what we need to do is make sure that we're identifying what opportunities there are in our organization by identifying what benefits we can hope to deliver. And one of the ways that you can do this is, I would say, go and look at your organization's corporate strategy, because the corporate strategy will have some objectives that you want to achieve over the coming years. And within that, you will have some things, I'm sure not everything in your corporate strategy, but there will be some things there where you can say, well, actually, you're not going to be able to achieve that if you don't have data governance in place. If we can explain to people that we don't have the right data, or it's not good enough quality, or we can't join it all together from different places in the organization. If you're telling an executive who is responsible for delivering that part of the strategy that they're not going to be able to deliver, then you're going to, you're going to be helping them. So instead of being how I was in the early days and saying, we need to do this because we need to make our data better, they're thinking, I've got all these other things to do and you're asking me to do more. So now you're actually saying, I know that you're responsible for doing this. You're not going to be able to do it with the data as it currently is, and I will help you. That's a different story indeed. So, which is a good way to get people on board. So Peter shared, so yeah, you need sponsorship from the executive. Absolutely. You're going nowhere with a data governance initiative if you don't have an executive sponsor. I totally agree with that one. So if you know what you're trying to achieve from doing data governance, this now leaves you in a much better position to design a data governance framework that is tailored to your organization. And it will be designed to deliver the benefits you've identified. Now, I am not a fan of standard data governance frameworks. I will be really honest about that. So I'd love to know who has tried to use a standard data governance framework. If you could just put in the chat whether you have or not. I'd love to know. No, there's a lot of so those of you that are saying yes, Peter's done exactly what I was just going to say. Can you say to let me know whether it was if you've used a standard one, pure, not customized, great, how successful it was for you. I would like that, exactly as Peter's done. That was a really good way of saying. Because in my experience, standard data governance frameworks are, much as some of you have put in the chat, they're great for inspiration if you haven't looked at one or seen one before. But you have to remember, they weren't designed for your organization. They weren't designed for any particular organization. They are theory. And they are not going to be something that you can cut and paste and put in a document and make it work for your organization. You have to, exactly, you have to adapt it. What everybody is saying here is you have to customize it, tailor it. I personally prefer to start from scratch each time, but then I've had 20 years of experience. So I would say use a standard framework for inspiration or for ideas, but it's really important that you create it, one that is correct for your organization. Now, over the years, I have worked with multiple clients in the same sector, and you might think, oh, well, they're all in, say, the insurance sector, so I could literally reuse the one from the last client and it would be great. Now, I can't lie and tell you they are vastly different. A lot of the things will be very similar, but it's the little details, the nuances that make it work in one organization and doesn't in another. So it's really important that you take that time to work out what will work for your organization. So, the best way of thinking about it is thinking about ordering a coffee. Now, currently I am under advice to not drink caffeine or not consume caffeine or dairy, which, considering a nice latte is one of my favorite coffees, is not ideal. Now, if you think back to, say, 20 years ago, before coffee shops were everywhere, I would go into one of the small independent cafes or something, and I could say, oh, I'd like a cup of coffee, please, but I can't have caffeine and I can't have dairy. And let's face it, they probably would have laughed at me and offered me a herbal tea. If I was lucky, or probably water. Now, that has all changed. Over the years, the coffee industry has worked out that we all have our own taste. We all like our coffee, or not even coffee, but we have it the way we like it. So now I can go into virtually any coffee shop, as I did yesterday, to be honest, and ask for a decaffeinated oat milk latte. And I get something which, as my husband says, maybe not really coffee, but it's the closest that I can drink at the moment without getting ill. But it's right for me. But you can see, if we had the standard approach, the latte with full of caffeine and milk, I'm going to end up feeling quite ill for a few hours. So it doesn't suit me. And I think you need to take that kind of thought process to your organization. If we force the standard approach, the standard latte coffee, it's not going to work. It's going to fail your organization. But if you tailor it and make it the dairy-free, the caffeine-free version, then it will work. So you've got to take that approach with your data governance and design a framework that is right for your organization and what it needs. Now, this was actually, this standard framework was actually a problem for a client I work with. I think it must be getting on for 5-6 years ago now in London. And they'd been doing data governance for about 18 months. And it just wasn't going very well. I think that's the polite way of putting it. And in an attempt to try and understand what they were doing wrong, the executive sponsor and 2 of the team came on one of my public training courses. And at the end of it, they came up to me and they went, "This has been really interesting. We're not doing some of the things that you said." And I went, right. And when they explained what it was, I said, well, yeah, I can see why that might be causing a problem. And they went, yeah, but I don't think we know enough to work this out. So they asked me to come in and look through, like do a review of what they'd done. And what they'd actually done was they'd implemented the ISO 8061 data quality management framework, which I knew existed up until that point, but I'd never really gone through it in loads of detail. So clearly to review it, I had to get up to speed with it. And as a bit, as some of you were saying in the chat, there are bits in it that are useful. There really are. I'm not dissing it. It has some valuable content, but it has nothing about roles and responsibilities. And in my experience, if you don't have clearly defined and agreed roles and responsibilities, nobody does anything. It's just a theoretical exercise. And it had some sections of activities that are something that only a very mature organization who had been doing data governance for many years should, or would be doing. So they had a problem that nobody was doing data governance, but they had no roles and responsibilities. So only the central team was trying to do anything, and they couldn't explain who or why anybody should be doing anything. So nobody else did. And they were also beating themselves up, trying to do things that they couldn't do because they hadn't got the foundations in place. Now, I would have loved to have torn it up and started again, but if you've got any kind of framework already, even if it's not working, that is not the best thing to do. The best thing to do is to adapt and tweak and work with what you can. So we removed the bits that were way too mature, something they just shouldn't be aiming for at that early stage. And we added in the roles and responsibilities. And, we eventually got to a framework that was right for their organization. And people started to engage. We started to roll out the roles and responsibilities, and all of a sudden things fell into place and they started to deliver some benefits from having data governance. But they spent about 18 months failing to do so because they had just literally tried to implement a standard framework. So I think most of you already had that kind of feeling from what you're saying. So Vishal's saying, have I got any examples on where something like DCAM failed? Yeah, so that was more or less what I was just saying. So they will fail if they're implemented as they are, because they weren't designed for your organization. And normally they just fail because nobody would do something because they're either too complicated or, there's bits missing, or even too much information. I'm a great fan of Dharma. I'm on the Dharma UK board, but the Dharma DMBOK actually is not a standard framework. It's advice on what you might consider doing. So that doesn't mean that you have to do exactly what is in there. You've got to tailor it to what's right for you. And I get that, yeah, when IT drives the change, not the business. That's, always try and get data governance driven by the business. Not easy sometimes, but it's definitely not an ideal way. It can be achieved successfully, but I would always rather that data governance was driven by the business. So if you've been finding what we've been, I've gone too far already. If we've finding what we've been talking about useful so far, then stay tuned to the end of this masterclass, because I will give you the opportunity to express an interest in a complimentary discovery call, but I'll give you more details on that later on. So we're going to come to the final key message, which is you need a simple approach to be successful with data governance. So I'm going to ask you to put in the chat, this time, not a yes or no. I want a number to signify how complicated your data governance framework is. So just between 1 and 5, where 1 is it's really simple, everybody can understand what we're trying to do, to 5 is it's so complicated, nobody can really get their head around what we're trying to do. So we got a few 3s. Oh, that was 1, that was good. 2.5. We got the whole range there, I would say. So but mainly towards the middle and lower, but a few of the more complicated ones. So my advice would be, don't try to cover every eventuality, particularly in your initial implementation of a data governance framework, because you'll end up with something so complicated that you either won't get it signed off and approved, or you might get it signed off and approved, but you're going to face extreme resistance adopting it because people won't be able to get their heads around it. So they'll just kind of go, I'll put that over there in the think about later pile because it's just too hard for me to think about, and you won't actually make any progress. So the best way I could think about to get people to get their head around this is to think about, so this is, this is the simplicity side of things is why it's important, is how we watch TV these days, because let's face it, it's really complicated, isn't it? So when I was a young child, which was many years ago now, in the UK, we only had 3 channels. Now, I told this analogy to my sister the other day, and she goes, there was 4. And we worked out, where she's a little bit younger than me, that the channel 4 came about when she was still too small to really remember. But we had 3 channels on the TV. And it didn't take long to decide what we were going to watch. My mum and dad had the TV Times magazine, and after dinner every evening, they would open it, they'd look at the 3 channels, they'd decide what we were watching, and we would all settle in to watch TV for the night. Now, think about what we do these days. There are so many options. It's ridiculous. If, you know, I don't watch much TV, I don't have much time. So when I do, I sit down with my husband and we watch something that we both like. There are some things that I do like that I miss, let's be honest. And now, sadly, a few months ago, my husband had an accident and ended up in hospital for a week. And when I got home from visiting in hospital every day, I just felt like I needed something to unwind and de-stress. And the first few nights, it was just an absolute nightmare because I thought I just need something to take my mind off. Now, I can't clearly watch any of the things that we watch together because he'll be upset and we'll have to watch them again later. So I'm thinking, oh, how about a nice costume drama or a rom-com? And then you're thinking, have I got anything recorded on the TiVo box? So I kind of had to find the TiVo remote and look through that, and then there wasn't anything. And then I'm thinking about, oh, I think a friend told me about something. I wonder if that's on Amazon Prime, and I couldn't find it there. And then I was thinking, oh, perhaps it was on Disney Plus. And then in the end, I was saying, you know, sending messages to my sister saying, can I borrow your Netflix account and what can I watch? And to be fair, the first night, I just gave up after about 45 minutes. I hadn't even watched anything. It was just so complicated to decide what to watch. And I gave up, got my Kindle, read a book instead. Now, you do not want people taking that approach to your data governance framework. You want to make it as simple as possible so that you can explain it to people in a way and they go, that makes sense. What do you want me to do? Not, oh my God, that's a nightmare. Or I'm just not going to do this. I'm going to go make a cup of tea. So my top tip is you've got to start with a minimal approach. Keep it as simple and small, which I think maybe Peter said early on in the chat. Really start simple and start small. And you can add details as you iteratively implement your data governance framework, and it can evolve and you can add detail as you need to over time. So it really is important that you do this. I've worked with organizations that have spent huge amounts of time and effort designing hugely complicated frameworks that can't be implemented. People refuse to do them. So we need to get everything done. Sorry, I was just reading the message. Getting a digger delivered. Wow. That's an unusual excuse. But yeah, what we need to do is make sure that our frameworks are as simple as possible. Now, sometimes they can't be absolute simplicity, but just make sure you remove all complexity and make it as simple, because otherwise people are just not going to adopt this. So the message today from me is, to be successful in data governance, you really need to follow the 6 principles we've discussed. And obviously now, brief time, we've only covered 3 in any detail, but I've got lots of free resources, which I am going to share a link with you in a second. And as I say, including a blog where we go all through these. Now, as I said, if you have found it useful and you'd like to learn more about what we've covered, how it could work for your organization, and how I can, perhaps help you with your data governance, simply type yes in the chat, or even send me a private message saying yes, and we'll be in touch to arrange that with you, which is no problem at all. Yes, thank you to the person who sent a private message there. And oops. This is the link to get the number of valuable, hopefully valuable things that I have pulled together. So there are loads of free resources on my website. If you haven't been there before, please go and help yourself to them. Anything to try and help people be more successful in data governance. I found it very hard the first years I was doing it, and I didn't really know who to talk to and have support from. So it's great to be able to help people not be in the same position as me. So hopefully that was useful. So I have one final thought for you at the end, but before we get to that, are there any questions that anybody wants to ask? Nobody's got any questions? Tia, you do I have any upcoming training? That's a good question. So I think we've just finished the last live online training for a few months. I do have some training in November, so that's not for a while, but there are some there's an online version of my training course that's currently available. I am in conversations to maybe do an in-person one in London in the summer, but we'll see about that. Robin, oh, hello, Robin, lovely to see you. How do you report success metrics culture uplift? It is really, it's a really good question. It's really hard. I can't give you the perfect set of metrics to use, because where we find our wins are not always consistent and in similar places. So I do try and do things where I will report on progress, on how things are going, but that's not really successes. That's just showing the success of the implementation. But what I do try and do is make sure I shout about everything we do. So I like to, very early on in a data governance initiative, design and implement a data governance issues resolution process. And I find that is the best way to become aware of a lot of the issues that your organization is experiencing. And then you can solve some, and then you can shout about the problems you solved, be that money, cost savings, time savings of people, or sometimes it's even just reputational damage that you've either protected against or kind of helped with. The culture uplift, I think, is a hard one. I was at a really good conference yesterday, and we were discussing this, because we were saying it's really hard to measure the culture, but you're going to have to do things in terms of even things like counting the number of data quality issues that are reported, because if nobody's reporting them, they're not considering data a particular asset. They're not thinking that it needs to be looked after and maintained. But if they are reporting it, then they're engaging. If you have a data governance, a data glossary or a data catalog, whatever you're calling it, perhaps you can use that to start looking at how many people are looking at it. It's all these things that we need to try to measure. That culture uplift is really hard. So anybody's got any great ideas, I'm always looking for those as well. But it's trying to do anything that proves that we're solving problems and that actually people are now thinking about their data more. So Michelle wants to know how records management fits with data governance. That is a really good question. So yeah, records management is slightly different because it refers to the documents, whereas we're talking about the granular building blocks. Now, I think it's okay for the same person to do them, because I think the two approaches need to be aligned. If it's a different person in your organization or team that does it to you, I think you need to work very closely with them, because they're going to be talking to people like they need information owners or information asset owners or record owners. And you're going around talking, saying, I want data owners. And it comes back to this simplicity, complexity thing. If we've got more than one role, we're going to confuse people. So I think, yes, they're separate things. But what we need to do is try and use one role name and put the different responsibilities in there. But they should be very aligned. And you need to make sure that whatever's going on between data governance and records management is aligned. Otherwise, you'll get duplication of effort or gaps and cause confusion with the business. Examples of frameworks that have worked for you. say, because I don't use standard ones. I design from scratch for each client. So I don't. So the framework itself is not like one little diagram I can share. It's quite it's a bit complicated. So that one is, I'm afraid I can't really do that in a way that would be useful to you, I'm afraid. Yes, businesses will have better control of knowledge and information if they get data governance. So Marco's in IT, once you've been data analytics leader. Wow, you've got a lot to deal with, Marco, but I think that it makes sense. I've helped a number of people do data governance from the analytics team that can work. So I think your initial assessment about data governance, so I don't know what you're assessing with data governance. I wouldn't necessarily start with a data governance policy workshop. I would start with doing some conceptual data model workshops to get an understanding of what data, a very high level understanding of what data is used and produced in each business area that you have, because during those workshops, you start to engage with people and you start to understand what's going on in the business and perhaps what the challenges will be, whether a standard data owner, data steward role will split would work, or whether you need something more complicated, because I don't think you should create the data governance policy on your own, and you can't do it with stakeholders that haven't started thinking about their data, if that makes sense. So I would definitely go with conceptual data models first, start getting people thinking about their data. It's almost like you have to understand what the roles, responsibilities, what the framework's going to look like before you can write your policy, if that makes sense, hopefully. So Peter's answered that. Marco, excellent. So I think we've finished all the questions. I hope that was useful to everybody, and thank you for joining. I was going to say on a Friday afternoon, but some of you are on a Friday morning. So but thank you very much for joining. It's been lovely to see you, and hopefully you'll find the stuff on the website useful.